We are now live, ladies and gentlemen, on a Tuesday night, and Tuesday night means one thing and one thing only. It's the Fantasy Football Buzz podcast. You are here with the Commish. Over there, we've got Cyclop live from beautiful North Carolina.
No, that way.
No, that way, correct. You were looking the wrong way. Cyclop, how you doing tonight?
Man, feeling great. It is, we've gotten through 2 preseason games. Thankfully, we only have 3 now, so we have to get through 1 more. And but feeling good about football season, even though there's a lot happening that we will get to tonight.
There is a lot happening, and as far as what we're going to get to tonight, let's go over that real quick. The first thing we're going to start off with is the Kenneth question of the night. I know Kenneth's online, but if you can just hold on for one more second. After that, we're going to talk about stacking. We're going to talk about stacking and busts, 2 things that are breast related, but have nothing to do with breasts. So, if your team's stacked or you've got a bust, I don't know. It's fantasy football. I guess they name things so that we as guys are very excited about it. But we're going to talk about that tonight, and we're also going to get into our mock draft. We had done rounds 1 through 6, and we were going to continue that tonight if we have time. But like I stated, the first thing we do, like we do every Tuesday night, is we talk to our number 1 fan, Kenneth from Texas. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I apologize about last week, but I am here.
We were worried about you. You're doing okay?
Yes, I'm fine.
All right.
I have a bit of news. Before I get to my question of the night, I do have a bit of news regarding my beloved Texans. I don't know if y'all had heard. There's been a couple of trades regarding my beloved Texans.
No, tell us.
John Reed has been traded to Seattle for I believe, a draft pick, and the Texans picked up corner Kadir Holloman also for a draft pick.
All right. Well, it's good because I don't think the Texans had any more draft picks left, so now they've got a few, and they sound like they're probably 7th rounders. All right.
I believe one of them was a 7th rounder. I'm not sure about the other one right off the top of my head.
All right. Let's get to your question, Kenneth. Come on.
Now, my question of the night is this. I know it's early, but I'm going to ask it anyway. With week 1 upcoming, which game or games do y'all consider to be the most intriguing?
Oh, man, we haven't even looked at the schedule yet.
I know it's early to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
All right. We'll do some research, and we'll answer that later. We'll bring that up.
Right.
And if anybody has an answer to that, bring it on, and we'll do some research on
well,
that.
Do you have one that you know is intriguing to you?
I want to take a page out of old Cyclops playbook. I'm gonna.
You're gonna defer.
I'm gonna take a look, and then I'll let y'all know.
All right,
sounds good.
That's fair enough. We appreciate it, Kenneth, and we're glad you're doing okay.
All right, talk to y'all later.
All right. Yeah, it's funny, doing the research, there's now all this information up about your week 1 lineup. And I'm like, week 1 lineup? I don't even have a team yet, let alone a week 1 lineup.
I have a question. How many leagues are you going to be in this year, Commish?
At one point in my life, I was at a maximum of 6, and I know that's not a lot for some of the fantasy football gurus out there, but it made my life very confusing and less fun to watch football on because I was always rooting against people, and I don't like that. I'll be playing, I'll have Tom Brady, and then I'm playing against Tom Brady. And it's like, I didn't want to be in that situation. I've narrowed it down to 3.
Okay.
But, I'm happy with that. What about you?
So I had narrowed it down to, I think, 4 last year. And I think my high was, again, right around 6 or so. And somehow, and I don't know how, I was counting them the other day. I think I'm in 7 this year.
Oh my
I
God.
don't even know how that happened.
But here's the thing is that you obviously have ones that mean more to you.
Yes.
Right. And so there's going to be a few of those that you're going to quote unquote blow off, right? Because you physically don't have the time to really be that guy who can be on every one of them. So somebody is going to get the advantage of playing against the Brad Cyclops every week because you don't have your heart in it, or you're not putting all of your effort into it, right?
So I have been very good over the years because our league, which is going on 30 years around, right?
Yeah.
That is my number one, and I'm very good at focusing on 1/2 teams, and then the other ones I don't focus on during the game. I'll focus on them during the week and set my lineups and do everything, but I don't focus on them unless the other first two I'm sucking in for the week. I'll look at the other ones,
Right.
but like
Right.
backups,
And then it just clears out, once you are doing well in one and not in the others, the others take a back seat, right?
That does happen, but I do try to focus on all of them, and with everything being on your phone these days, it's definitely a little bit easier. You don't have to get in front of the computer to do everything, but and that leads into my another question I have that I would love to hear people's answers is, how many hours a week do you focus on fantasy football during football season? Right? And we can talk about it.
A lot.
Yeah. Right? It's Sunday obviously for games, it's Monday for games, it's pickups, it's lineup setting, it's
the research going through
agents,
determining
who to start, who not to.
But you know what? It's one of those jobs that's a lot of fun to do.
Yeah.
So we put in hours, but hopefully you get paid at the end, right? I mean, it's almost like if you do a good job, you're going to do well. But to me, it's always been more about the pride than it is about the money at the end. We do have our first question of the night. Who would you pick in a PPR in the 10th overall slot in a 12-team draft, a running back or a top wide receiver? And I think that has a lot to do with who's available, right? So in a PPR, obviously, I like Devontae and I like Hill. I like Kelsey at that spot. If Kelsey hasn't been taken, then I'm grabbing Kelsey at 10.
Are you taking Kelsey before Adams?
Yes. In a PPR, I am. Yes, I am.
PPR?
Yes. Now,
interesting.
That being said, if the following running backs, if any of the following running backs are available, I probably would take them first. Obviously, McCaffrey and Cook and Kamara and Henry, right? Ezekiel Elliott, possibly Aaron Jones, and Barkley. And I'm not as down on Barkley as a lot of people are. I think people are going to overlook him. He's actually falling to the second round in some drafts. But with PPR, Barkley is a machine. But just make sure that you have a backup for those first few weeks if Barkley doesn't play.
Right.
But when it comes crunch time in the playoffs, and it's PPR, you're going to be happy that you have Barkley. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, I look at Adams there, and as I was doing some research for tonight, I started looking at targets per game last year, and there's some interesting ones up there. Because targets obviously most of the time equate to catches, right? To some point,
or production, I'd say, right?
Production,
some type of production, sure.
Right. So there, I like Adams. As far as running backs, in 10 out of 12, which means then you're getting the number 15 pick. So you're going to get you potentially have another running back coming back. So if you can get one of the top, if you can get Adams there at 10, I think maybe you do that, and you're still going to get Gibson or Mixon or one of those guys at 15.
Yeah,
coming back.
Yeah, that's true. You're going to, that's a good point. And that's absolutely acceptable if you can grab somebody. I mean, I know maybe I'm a little too high on Kelsey, but I think based on his history and the differentiation between him and the others, and just how solid and consistent he's been year over year over year, And we don't know what's going to happen in Green Bay. I mean, look, even all the way up to the number 1 pick with Christian McCaffrey, I can make an argument for why you should not pick him. Okay, I can make an argument for every player.
Of course,
right?
Of course.
So with Davante Adams, you have to be the one thing that you have to be a little concerned about is the fact that if things aren't going to go as well in Green Bay, you're going to have Jordan Love coming in, and are they going to have that kind of chemistry?
I don't see that. I don't see.
I'm not saying that's a reason not to pick him in the first round by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, I'm not saying don't draft Davante Adams. I'm just saying if you're going to make an argument why you wouldn't draft Adams, that's one of them.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, look, everything's a feeling. Who you like? Who do you like to watch? There's a lot of different things that can go into that. Look, you might get Najee Harris at 15, right? Potentially, and I know a lot of people.
You might even get Taylor at 15.
I don't know that Taylor's falling to 15 in a lot of drafts, but I was going to say maybe if Taylor's there at 10, you get him and then worry about then you're getting a DK Metcalf or a Calvin Ridley or
his ADP right now in PPR is actually 14, right below Najee Harris.
In PPR, okay.
In PPR,
okay. I guess yeah, probably in half PPR it's a little higher.
In half PPR, yes, it is going to be a little higher because you had to worry about Himes coming in. Taylor is now it's actually 14 and a half PPR as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But the difference is he's above Najee in a half PPR.
Right.
As opposed to below.
We helped you out a little bit there. There's, like you said, we can only give our advice and
right, exactly. Yeah. And if anybody has any questions, hit us up, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, make a comment. It'll come to us live. And we will go ahead and address it right here on the air. In the meantime, what we're going to do is we're going to jump into stacking. Now, Brad, do you want to explain what stacking is?
So stacking is taking generally a quarterback and a running back / wide receiver / tight end on the same team. So it could be Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf, or Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams, something to that effect. Generally, I think people equate it most with a quarterback and or a wide receiver / tight end, not generally a running back.
Correct, and it's mainly been used as a DFS tool, right?
Correct,
and the reason is because of I mentioned the word consistency before. The level of consistency that you need to take advantage of a stack is difficult to find, which is why in DFS you're going to jump on a stack, right?
Absolutely.
Now, personally, for season-long stacking, I only go with quarterback, wide receiver, or / tight end in very few cases.
Right.
But for the most part, I'm staying away from quarterback, running back stacks, and the only exception to that would be your receiving running backs, and even then, I'm still concerned about the goal line, the rush losses, the rushing touchdowns, because at any given moment, you cannot have your quarterback throw a touchdown and have your running back run in a touchdown at the same time, unlike you can when it's a wide receiver and a quarterback that are stacked.
Of course.
All right. So who would be number 1 on your list of stacking recommendations?
I made a list, and there's a bunch on the list. I mean, it's got to be number 1 is probably Mahomes, just because he's going to get his numbers with other receivers as well. So, and Kelsey or Hill.
Well, if we're stacking, which one are you? That's part of the negative of the stack, right? So you have the Mahomes Tyreek Hill stack. You have the Mahomes Kelsey stack. If you're lucky enough, which you are not going to be, to get Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelsey, wonderful. Then you've got a nice stack of pancakes right there, and you're going to win your league.
And a really tough bye week, but yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, and that's actually the reason why, if I had to rank my stacks, the first stack that I would have is Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams.
Right.
And a lot of that has to be from last year. a 34.1% target share to Devontae Adams. I mean, what has changed from last year?
Nothing.
And it's been above 30% over the past 3 years.
So the reason I chose Mahomes over Rodgers, and I was just about to say Rodgers, is because of the quarterback overall play, right? Because Mahomes is going to get more points generally a game than Rodgers. So you have to equate that in with stacking as well.
Okay,
in a season log.
I understand that I'm not necessarily, I'm looking at as the stack itself, because we know you're going to draft Mahomes before you draft Aaron Rodgers, right? We know that. So it's a matter of what is the combined stack of Rodgers Adams going to give you versus the Mahomes Tyreek Hill. Now, I'll tell you, it's going to be close. And the only reason, it's almost like a 1A, 1B, the only reason that I would have Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill as my second stack is because of the Kelsey factor. A lot of the touchdowns are going to go. Look, there's no denying that Mahomes with his 38 touchdowns and 5,000 yards is going to be incredible. We know that.
So can you tell me off the bat, okay, and we have another question coming up here. Was it Kelsey or Hill in the target share last year? As far as without looking, was Kelsey higher in targets per game or Hill last year?
Well, you're asking because it's probably the opposite of what I'm going to say. The most obvious that comes to mind is Kelsey, and a lot of that has to do with the Hill inconsistency over the years. Although he was consistent last year. Yeah.
So Hill had averaged 9 targets a game, and Kelsey averaged 9.7.
Ha! Yeah, I was right.
So they were very close. Again, targets don't always tell the story, but targets surely can, make the story. Right. Because the targets are what's happening out on the field. The number 2 receiver in targets last year per game. Can you tell me who that was? I bet most people without looking couldn't tell me who that was.
Scary Terry?
Nope.
Who was it?
It was Keenan Allen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. He's on my list of game changers.
Yes. Now, Devontae Adams had 10.6 and Allen had 10.5. That's amazing.
It is amazing. It's a question of, what do you do with those targets though, right? Well, I mean, we know what he did. But, you could have somebody getting half those targets, but if every one of those targets is caught and every one of those targets is for a touchdown, like 2 years ago with Mark Andrews in the end zone, then it doesn't matter, right, how many you have.
Or Robert Tonyan last year, right? Who had touchdowns and 50 catches or whatever it was.
We do have a question from a Facebook user. Who's the second receiver gone after Adams? We were just talking about Tyreek. Is Tyreek the obvious number 2 wide receiver, Brad?
No, absolutely not. I think it's got to be Stephon Diggs. All right.
Very interesting. Are we talking about PPR?
I don't know, but I think in general, Diggs had 166 targets last year. Led the NFL in targets.
I get that.
He's in the perfect offense for just getting tons of targets. He had 10.4 compared to Adams, who had 10.6, and was just solid every single week. Every week, he had at least his low was 6. I mean, and he had double targets in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games. So I don't know how you pass on Stephon Diggs as the number 2 overall wide receiver.
I you don't know how I do by picking Hill. That's how I do. I don't necessarily think that Diggs is the automatic, and the main reason is we've seen 1 year of the Allen Diggs combination, and that's our number 2 stack, our number 3, I guess, or 2 stack.
Probably,
which we'll talk about in a second. But we've seen what Tyreek Hill and Mahomes will do. But my same argument against the Mahomes Hill stack being number 1 also goes for this, which is Kelsey going to get that target share in the goal in the end zone, where Diggs, what has he got? Gabriel Davis? Who's he going to lose?
And Beasley.
Beasley, I mean, Emmanuel, I mean, who are they going to lose wide receiver share to? So are you wrong by taking Diggs as a second receiver? No. But I don't think I'm necessarily wrong by taking Hill either. I think that they're very close, and I don't know if there's much daylight between the two of them.
I mean, there's still a huge argument for DeAndre Hopkins as the number 2 wide receiver.
There I wouldn't go. Yeah.
Well, again, it didn't seem like it over the season, but he had 160 targets last year.
I understand. And how many of those were caught? How many of those went over his head? Yeah, exactly.
I know, but that was also their first year together. So this is year 2. Who knows? I mean,
I'm personally, whether I don't know if we're talking about PPR or half PPR, I'm taking Calvin Ridley before I take Hopkins. But that's just me.
I really like Ridley this year. Where I sit in our draft, if he's there sitting for me, because I have the number 3 picks, right? So I'm coming around.
Well, that's good to know. So it's right before me. At least I know who's not going to be there when I pick.
That's someone I'm looking at potentially there. I mean, he's going to get, and that leading right into it could be a stack, right? Matt Ryan, who was terrible last year, stat wise compared to the year before, because it seemed like the year before he was just putting up they're catching up, and he's putting up 400 yards a game in essentially catch up time, garbage time, which is great for fantasy. But without Julio Jones there, right? Ridley's got to be the guy getting the targets there.
And Pitts.
Yeah.
And Mike Davis. Look, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with that offense, which is why I'm not saying it's a bad stack, but it's not going to be in my top 5. And thank you, by the way, for the comment from our Facebook user. If anybody out there is watching us on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, go ahead, just like this user, make a comment, and we will answer it live on the show, or you can always give us a call at 772-800-BUZZ. We're going to get back into the topic of stacking. We mentioned that our 1A and 1B stacks, we've got Rodgers and Adams or Mahomes and Hill. So I think Rodgers, Adams. I think, Brad, you said Mahomes, and then Hill and or Kelsey. Right?
Yeah.
So it brings on the second one, which is, would you say is Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs?
I mean, they got to be right up there, right? There's so many that you could put in, the 1 through, let's say, 8. There's so many that are interchangeable as far as stacking. But I think Allen and Diggs has to be right up there in the top 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. You can't really make an argument against it, which is what I was trying to do before. And, you really can't.
You almost talked yourself into it.
No, I wasn't that much. But the only question is it 2 or is it 1C? Are you going to get the same production with Josh Allen and Diggs, or you're going to get with Rodgers and Adams and Mahomes and Hill? I think if you're stacking, you see, and here's the thing. If you're stacking and you get any of these stacks, these 3 stacks, you're in good shape. I think that the next tier down is when you start talking about Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. I think that really gets out of those first 3, the Rodgers, Adams, Mahomes, Hill, Allen, Diggs, and it brings us to
like Wilson, Metcalf, Herbert, Allen, things like that. Brady and Evans.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second, since you brought that up. So I'm going to type this in here: stack Brady, Evans. Now, are we stacking Brady and Evans, or are we stacking Brady and Godwin?
or Brady and Brown.
Well, you're not going to stack Brady and Brown. I mean, if you end up getting
Generally
Brown
not.
at some point, fine, but you're not going to search for that stack. You're not going to go out of your way. You know, the way it happens with quarter, it's not, these stacks aren't going to just happen magically. Sometimes they do.
Of course.
But what might happen is you have an option between Ryan Tannehill and Tom Brady. And let's assume that you have Tannehill ranked above Brady. If you have Evans or Godwin, you might want to now stack.
Right.
Go ahead and take Brady instead of Tannehill so that you can have that stack. And it goes the other way around with Tannehill and A.J. Brown. So the question to me, though, is, and what brings this stack into question is what happened last year with Evans. He had a season low in targets. He didn't have the kind of year that you would expect. Are we going to see that again? I mean, Brady had his almost second best year ever, and Evans didn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he just spread the ball around everywhere, right? Yeah. And then Brown came in and took a lot of targets. You know, Evans had some big games, but not the consistency over the season. And that's where you get a little nervous about stacking with someone like that who's down closer to. I'm big with stacking. I'm big on targets, right? So I keep bringing that up where some of these other guys are averaging 8, 9, 10 targets a game. Mike Evans was down in the, closer to 7, even a little less. He was 6.6 or 6.8. 6.8. He had 109 targets last year. So you see his targets actually got better as the season goes. So, it's heavier stacked towards the second half of the season, as we saw that as with the Bucks got better during the season. So does that continue? And does that trend continue? And that's what you want to, think about when you're considering doing something like that. Or are they going to struggle again early in the season to try to find their stride and then, blow up in the second half of the season? We don't know.
All right. So let's talk about this stack here. What about Herbert and Keenan Allen? We were talking, I think you had asked who was the second receiver in the NFL last year in targets.
That's
and
correct.
It was Keenan Allen.
Yep.
What do you think of the Herbert Allen stack? Is that something that you're going to seek out? If you have Keenan Allen, are you going to seek out getting Herbert?
It's amazing. Like Keenan Allen just doesn't really come up in discussions. It feels like
he was hurt. He was hurt last year. He missed 5 or 6 games.
No, he only missed 2 games. He only missed 2 games.
You sure?
Maybe he got hurt in week 15. But then he missed 16
He didn't play
17.
6. He didn't play 6, 16, or 17.
6 was a bye.
No, 7 was a bye. So
I have it as 6 as a bye. But we can.
I think maybe you're looking at this year, but I'm
looking at 2020.
Okay. The point is
not here tonight.
When I needed him the most, he disappeared on me. The mother disappeared on me, and then Guyton got all of his catches.
Yeah.
And I lost the Super Bowl. Can we just move on?
So are you bitter and you're not taking Keenan Allen this year? I want to know.
Love Keenan Allen. And I am not bitter. I forgive you, Keenan. And if I have an opportunity, because you're going to take Ridley. Now, if I have an opportunity to grab Keenan Allen, I probably will. The question is where. For half-point PPR, possibly 3rd round. I'm not going to take him in the 2nd round. And the question is, who's available for me in the 3rd round?
So twice last year, and as I'm looking it over, this might be twice last year, he had 19 targets in a game.
Yeah. Incredible.
That's amazing.
He's absolutely incredible. Love the kid. Okay. Well, what about, you mentioned it briefly, but Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf. How do you feel about that stack? And are you concerned about Tyler Lockett at all?
Not really. Metcalf is a beast. The guy's huge. He's fast. He loves going deep to him. He's going to get his targets. He's going to get his catches. He's going to get his touchdowns. Last year, Russell Wilson was like 2 different quarterbacks, the first half of the season and the second half of the season, disappeared.
So frustrating.
Yeah.
So
I got to imagine, but people that had him early on are just like Breeze, it was like Breeze, not Drew Brees, but they were just walking through the season, right?
Yep.
Him and Allen, but then he just disappeared. So I don't know what happened to that offense. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if he was hurt, but
I think Carson, when Carson got hurt, it also took some time to change that offense up. So yeah, there were factors, and Russell Wilson will still finish in the top 10 of quarterbacks, regardless of where you take him. Maybe even the top 5.
Yeah. I like that stack. If I could get those two on my team, I have no problem with that. You just, if you can do it, play it out and see how it goes, and hope that you get enough out of Wilson that because those guys could get you 50 points a game.
Absolutely.
If they're hooking up.
We got several comments here. So the DK Lockett, number 7 and number 8 in PPR last year. And that's my point. That's what I was saying, was if you have a stack, is having Russell Wilson and DK enough of a stack, which is also why I have them pretty low. I mean, compared to some of these other stacks where you got one receiver, which was my reason for putting Rodgers and Adams first. But that's pretty incredible with Lockett and DK. And he says that Lockett was painful to own last year.
Yeah, because he was up and down. He would have these like great games, and then so Lockett had 132 targets and Metcalf had 129. I mean, they were neck and neck, right?
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. Yeah, I even though Lockett had a few more, Lockett had these huge games. Oh, so he had 20 targets in one game, so he outdoes Keenan Allen. But then he would kind of disappear in other games, right? And it would be Metcalf, Lockett. You didn't know what to do. So certainly frustrating.
What about Tannehill Brown? AJ Brown. Is Julio Jones coming in going to make a difference? We know they lost Davis. We know they don't have Humphrey.
Julio Jones hasn't even practiced.
Julio Jones doesn't need to practice.
AJ Brown is hurt. Derrick Henry is going to fall apart after 4 games, getting hit after he carries it 150 times in the first 4 games. Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, I like, Tannehill, although kind of quietly puts up consistent numbers.
Yeah.
Right?
Tannehill could win you your fantasy league. And when I say that, I mean in the same way that you could have a mediocre quarterback win the Super Bowl. If everything is clicking and everybody is doing their job, Tannehill could win your fantasy league as long as you're not relying on Tannehill to be your team leader.
Right. Just like the quarterback from the Ravens.
Lamar?
No. Years ago.
Yes. Yeah, he's Kyle Bowler. Kyle Bowler.
Dilfer. Oh, I'm thinking Dilfer.
And Dilfer, yeah, and Kyle Bowler. All right, well, here's another stack. What about the new stack of Stafford and Woods?
Funny.
What's so funny? I mean, it was
Staff and Wood.
Yeah.
No, I like it. Woods was a beast last year. I mean, he gets those short passes. He gets the mid-range passes. He doesn't get a lot downfield, but he does, so for Stafford, I think he's like the perfect receiver for Stafford. Like
Woods, you mean?
Woods, yeah. Yeah, because he'll take those quick hits and take them downfield. He'll take he'll get those 10, 15-yard, outs. He doesn't drop the ball. So I think Stafford will rely and be looking at Woods a lot.
Yeah. And we're back. We passed the stack with Tannehill and Brown. One of our Facebook users let us know that Brown was actually number 12 in PPR in 14 games. And Brown was having a good one where Tannehill was number 7 QB last year. And another one wants to know, what does Kupp take away with his downfield ability from Brown? I think he means from Woods.
Woods, yeah.
No, I mean nothing. Downfield, nothing. I think
No.
Cooper Kupp is, if anything, is a target monster, and he's going to get a lot of the checkdowns from Stafford. We also, who knows what's going to happen with Darrell Henderson? Is he going to be catching the ball out of the backfield? Or are they going to rely
not
on
with a sprained thumb?
Are they going to be relying on Cooper Kupp more? So, yeah, I mean that's a good question. But back to
Can I?
Yeah.
I want to go deep into a few stacks here, and
Yeah,
these
go
are going to
ahead.
be like you're going to laugh, and it's going to be like, oh, no, that's. But what about Fitzpatrick,
Fitzpatrick and McLaurin.
and McLaurin? All
I
right.
like it.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean, I'm looking at how Fitzpatrick was like peppering Parker.
Parker, yeah.
Right. So he loves to go to the big receiver, to the big guy on the team. McLaurin is that guy. So I really like that.
Well, let me say this, and I talked about this last week. You want to pick people for your fantasy team that are going to win you a championship, not make you 8-8.
Right.
Or I guess now it's no
9
longer
and
8-8. It's 9-8
No,
or 8-9 or 8.5 and 8.5. But your first, I think that the knee-jerk reaction with Fitzpatrick is, come on, Fitzpatrick's not going to be on my roster when I win the Super Bowl in fantasy. But you know what? He could. And he's just the guy in that system matched up, paired with scary Terry McLaurin, who would be able to take you to that next level. So do I have a problem with this stack? No, not at all. In fact, I like this stack better than I like the Cousins-Jefferson stack. I almost like this stack better than the Tannehill-Brown stack, because I think the Tannehill-Brown stack is not going to win you a championship. Now, Fitzpatrick and McLaurin may not either, but I think that the ceiling is so much greater.
But you add Curtis Samuel in there. I mean, he has other targets in that offense, which is what you want when you're stacking, right? To get those other points and the drop-offs to Gibson, because they want to use him kind of like they use McCaffrey. So I really, you think about it, and it's very interesting.
Yeah. What else you got?
So another one, a deep stack, let's say, not relating to poker, Darnold and Robbie Anderson. And I know that people, it's like, what? These two are back together. They played in New York together.
Thank you very much for joining us on the Fantasy Buzz podcast, everybody. How could you recommend that anybody even draft Sam Darnold, let alone use him in a stack?
Maybe you're in a 16 or 20 team league. They're out there.
All right, go. I'll let you pontificate, knowing how I feel about this. But go ahead.
Look, I'm not saying do it. There's 15 other stacks I'd rather do before this. But if it gets down to a point and you're trying to do that, Robbie Anderson had 8.5 targets per game last year. Okay, these guys have played together. Darnold was in an awful system in New York, right? He's going to be in a better system in Carolina. They have DJ Moore. They have McCaffrey. There should be openings in the offense to get to be able to get the ball downfield. All right. I don't know. It could be a complete, but I'm like I said, it's a deep stack. It's a deep stack.
Let us know how you feel about the Darnold.
Please let us know.
Anderson stack. Give us a call, 772-800-BUZZ, or you can always comment on YouTube Live or Facebook Live, and we will get it on the air, and we can all make fun of Brad together.
Please do.
Any other stacks?
No, I'm out.
All right. So we are now stackless, and now we're going to talk about busts, right? We were going to talk about movers, but you know what? I think it's more important going into the draft that people understand who some of the busts are going, who we think some of the busts are going to be, because that's really can make or break your team, usually break your team if you have the wrong guy on there. So, Brad, you said you have one at just about every position. Who are you looking at first?
Sam Darnold. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so QB.
Yeah.
All right, Lamar Jackson. All right.
Are you bitter? You're just a little bitter though?
I'm a lot bitter. Last year he ended up QB 10. All right. He's still being taken around the QB 5. Right. I don't think they upgrade. I mean, getting Sammy Watkins, I don't think it's a huge upgrade. He's going to be hurt half the season. It's not going to do much. I think teams have figured him out a little bit. We saw that last year. He did come on a little bit later in the year.
At the end of the year.
He did, granted, but it seemed like a lot of desperation when they were doing that. I just think he doesn't have the weapons on offense. I like J.K. Dobbins. I even like Gus Edwards, but I really don't like the receivers there. And I think it will be easier to defend him in year 3. And I see him.
Do you see him as a bust at his ADP, or do you see him if he's being period or
at his ADP?
Okay, yeah. So right now his ADP is QB4 is at 51, meaning he's being drafted in a 10-man league in the 6th at the beginning of the 6th round.
Before a lot of times before Kyler Murray, before some of these other guys that
not too many times before Kyler Murray. I mean, Kyler Murray, yes, it's close. Kyler Murray has an ADP of 43. It's Mahomes, Allen, Murray, and then the question is, are you going Lamar? Are you doing Prescott or Wilson? That's your next tier.
Right.
So you're saying at that ADP he's a bust, or let's just give you a scenario, okay? Mahomes gone, Josh Allen gone, Kyler Murray gone, Dak Prescott gone, Russell Wilson gone. Are you taking Lamar Jackson?
No, I'm taking Herbert.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. Probably taking Russell Wilson. Then probably Lamar Jackson. I think he's closer to 9 or 10 quarterback rather than 4 or 5.
Okay. So somebody wants to know, what is the criteria for a bust? The criteria really is based upon their ADP, where somebody is expected to be drafted versus where they end up at the end of the season.
So last year, Lamar Jackson was being taken number 1 or 2 quarterback, ended up at 10. Is that a bust?
Yes.
Yeah, I would agree.
That would be a bust.
That would be a bust.
Now, at the same time, a bust, in retrospect, a bust isn't somebody who got injured that wasn't predicted to get injured, right? So like a Kenny Galladay last year was a major bust.
Yeah, that injury bust.
But that was injury, and it wasn't a predictable injury. What about Kenny Galladay this year? Right now he has an ADP as wide receiver 24. He's playing with the Giants offense right now. Quite frankly, he's being drafted to me a lot higher than he really should be going. At an ADP, let me see here.
Is he even practicing?
No.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how people are taking him. I don't know. I haven't done a lot of research as far as
we do have okay, we're going to cut you up because we have a call coming in.
Okay.
Welcome to the Buzz. How are you tonight?
Hey, what's going on? How you guys doing?
Good.
Great.
You have a question?
Yeah, sorry. Let me mute the broadcast.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, thank you.
Now I can hear you guys live. How you doing?
Great.
We have a fantasy show too, and don't worry, I'm not going to plug it without.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and plug it. That's fine. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's Yards After the Catch. We're on every week, Friday night, talking about the same things you guys are talking about, Facebook and YouTube. You guys are talking about busts and stuff right now. Obviously, that's something that I think everybody has to consider. That's one of those things that you're not going to know until the season carries on. But you brought up Lamar Jackson, and I did ask the question, what is the criteria for a bust? And I agree with you. It's the ADP versus the performance. But we were talking about, and then you brought up the injury. So we've been talking about guys like Barkley, because he's a big risk this year. Not, he's played 15 games in the last 2 seasons. Is he healthy? Is he ready to go? You brought up Galladay, who was injured last year, isn't even 100% right now, has already come down with quote unquote minor injuries in practice. So when you see these type of things, guys coming off injuries, even C-Mac, C-Mac is your automatic number one.
Right.
It takes a big set of cojones to pass on him at number one.
Right.
Right. You're not going to, but when you draft him, you can't help but wonder how the season's going to go. So, are these guys? I guess the question is, when you talk about these guys that are injured or have been injured before and things like that, is that a bust situation or is that something else? I don't even know.
No, I think, and we,
right?
no, good question. We kind of alluded to that. If an injury is predictable, and when I say predictable, I mean that you're getting somebody that is injury prone, somebody that has been hurt multiple times in the past, and you are drafting them high. And you can even look at somebody like Barkley, right? If he gets hurt, that's a bust if he's drafted in the first round or even the second round, because it was predictable. However, this is where the fun of fantasy comes in, because you have to look at that ceiling when you're looking at the bust floor. And is the ceiling of Saquon Barkley, right? Is the ceiling of Barkley much higher to counteract that floor bust? And quite frankly, you're sitting in the second round, especially if it's a PPR, and people are stupid enough to pass on Barkley. Hey, I'm willing to take a chance on that ceiling, because Barkley is going to win me my championship if he's healthy.
Yeah, and I agree with you. We've definitely talked about that as well. And Barkley is definitely the one who scares me. Most of the mock drafts that we're doing, we're seeing Barkley go in the first round or at least on the horn. But
he drops every week. He drops another spot.
Can I bring up somebody else? Look at Elliott. Look at Elliott last year. Look at McCaffrey. Right? These guys. Now, McCaffrey didn't have any injuries until last year. And my personal opinion is they just didn't push. They didn't want to bother. He probably could have come back later in the season, but they weren't, their record wasn't good. And they're like, screw it. Let's just wait till next season. But look at Elliott last year. He was hurt, right? And he's all of a sudden moving up to number 3, 4, 5 in drafts.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Elliott, and I love that you bring this up, is because you talk about Elliott before he got hurt, and you talk about the entire posse of Cincinnati, especially now, guys that can get you points in Cincinnati, and then the quarterback goes down. So when Prescott goes down, it affects everybody else's points. Burrow goes down, it affects everybody else's points. And that's not even, I know we're not considering injuries bust, and I agree with that as well, but that's also something, especially, again, guys coming off injuries. Dak is so high because he performs, but how long is it going to take him to shake off the rust? Is he going to come back? How long is that process going to take? So you need to make sure you've got a good QB2 to cover if you're going to take Dak. And I'm not saying not to take Dak. I'm saying you better have a plan in place if that's the guy.
I was just going to
have to take Dak first before you get that backup.
Right. I was just going to bring that up. If you're taking Barkley in the first round, right, where, look, quite honestly, I have the number 3 pick in our main draft. Now I'm in several, but in our main draft, I'm number 3 in our league, right? Do I take Henry? Do I take Barkley there? Do I take Elliott? But if, Henry is going to be the most durable, right? He's not really injury prone. He's going to get 500 carries or whatever the number is going to be, 350, whatever. But
and proven top 6, both formats, 2 years running.
Right. No, absolutely. But if you're going to take Barkley there, you better have a plan for the rest of the draft, not just, for the season, but in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round, you better have a plan knowing that he is injury prone.
Let me bring up a stat that's very important with Barkley. Back in 2019, Barkley week 7 through 16, when Daniel Jones came on and he took over, Barkley produced 4 games of 13 or more fantasy points, with two of those were massive weeks, and 5 games of 11 or fewer points. So we have to keep that in mind. And I know this is not the 2019 Barkley. We don't know what Barkley we're going to get.
Right.
Yeah,
So, if Barkley has the opportunity to be both the best sleeper or the best bust, or the worst bust.
Yeah, let me throw in another stat that we've done on yards after the catch that you guys may or may not have seen, and this one really gets you thinking. No running back has been in the top 6 for more than 2 years in a row in over 10 years, except for C-Mac. C-Mac's, of course, done it before he got hurt, but no other running back has been in the top 6.
It's amazing, right?
More than 2 years in a row. Kamara, Cook, and Henry have both done it 2 years in a row. So being that no one else has done it, if you believe that stat will maintain, that means Cook, Kamara, and Henry are not going to be in the top 6 again. And the reason I bring up top six is because there is such a drop off. That's kind of where the cliff is 6 or 7 when it comes to your points on running back. So that's why 6 is relevant. So when you start throwing that in your mind, does that make you more or less apprehensive about these guys, knowing that you're not going to pass on them? That's accepted.
That's a great stat. That's actually a great stat.
Well, what is your name? What is your name, by the way?
Chris Fox.
Chris. All right, Chris.
Chris Fox with yards after the catch.
Okay, what's your feelings on J.K. Dobbins with regard to the bust possibility with Gus Edwards?
I'll tell you what, I love J.K. Dobbins. If he was on a team where he was going to be the featured back, or even if it was J.K. and Gus on a different team, but when you throw in Lamar Jackson and his ability to run, and I know they don't want him to run as much, but he's going to run. Even at number 10 last year, he still had plenty of rushing yards. And so you talk about running back by committee on a lot of teams. Lamar Jackson is part of that committee in Baltimore. Now, if you want to look at the stats, I think J.K. Dobbins leads the rushing. I think he's the number 1 guy there, but I really think he's going to lose enough to these other 2 guys, to Jackson and to Edwards, that you're going to want to be real careful what you expect from him on your fantasy team. Again, he's not one. I'm not saying not to draft. I'm saying, honestly, I'll put him in that bust category based on the ADP, based on the expectation of what you need Dobbins to do. I don't think he's going to live up to it on your fantasy team.
Yeah, I'm shocked. I am quite frankly shocked that you have guys who are absolute number 1 running backs, not in a running back by committee situation, who are being drafted after J.K. Dobbins, which is why I put him in that bust category. You've got people like Montgomery, Carson, Henderson. These guys are going to run their backfields. They're
James Robinson now.
Yeah, Robinson, of course. They're not going to be in this situation. But right. Dobbins is being drafted ahead of every one of those. And that's my biggest concern about Dobbins right now. I like Dobbins. Like you said, I think he's a great player. But for fantasy, I think he's just going a little too high.
And this is where your deep rounds, your round 6 through 10, 6 to 11, this is where the separation is between the guys who are the teams that are more likely to perform well versus finish well versus the teams who might win a couple games, is that value that's there in 6 through 9. And the value left in these rounds because people draft too early. People are taking quarterbacks too early. And I understand Mahomes and Allen, but, you're taking second and third tier quarterbacks. You're seeing those guys go in round 4, round 5.
Not round 8.
All the mock drafts I've done, we've talked about this on yards after the catch multiple times. When you get down there in that 6 to 10 rounds, there are still QB1s sitting down there that late. If you just hang on, Aaron Rodgers, I've seen go as late as round 9. That's odd, but I've still seen it. So you've really got to let the value fall to you. for your strategy. That's got to be your number one strategy, is let the value fall to you. But you've got to rein yourself in, rein your emotions in when you see someone like Dobbins and you think he's going to perform well. You've got to be able to look at your board and say, but there's people that I should be taking before Dobbins. And maybe I don't get them, but I'm going to get better value.
What you're talking about, I 100% did last year. I took Jackson with my number 2 pick, and he was sitting there, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it, right? I thought he would be gone by that point because I think I took McCaffrey, right? So he was out also, I believe, in that league. And I did it, and I went for it. And I never in 30 years, I don't think I've ever taken a quarterback above round like 5 or 6 or something like that. And I finally did it, and it absolutely bit me in the ass. Fortunately,
help me.
Well, fortunately, later in the year, I was a masterful with some trades and ended up coming back and making the playoffs. But he absolutely just crushed me for the first half of the year.
But in all fairness, you traded him to me, and he got me to the Super Bowl. So it all depends on which perspective you want to look at it. Hey, Chris,
and that's a great point, because we all know, if you're a fantasy veteran, if you're new to fantasy football, hear what I'm going to say. I'm sure the guys here are going to back me up on this. Look, your draft will win you games, but the waiver wire will win you championships. And I'll throw trades in there as well.
Trades.
Come off, because what your team looks like after the draft will not be what your team looks like at the end if you're in it. If you make the playoffs, your team is going to look drastically different, because you need to make moves. You're going to have to replace injuries, of course, but the waiver wire is where there's going to be so much value as the season goes on. And so
I mentioned this before, that I got to the Super Bowl and I only had one guy on my roster that I drafted.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's how we all work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Chris, listen, we got to run. We're almost out of time here on the show, but we really appreciate it, and we hope everyone watches Yards After the Catch on Friday nights. You can check them out on Facebook, you said, and on YouTube as well. You on Twitter?
Yes, sir. My co-host, Roop, there it is, at Mr. Football Today, represents the show on Twitter. Thanks for the plug, gentlemen, and thanks for a few extra minutes. And I love yakking football. So
all right.
Anytime.
All right.
Take care, Chris. Thanks.
That was awesome to get that perspective of something.
Yeah, it's always good to hear other perspectives. I almost can predict who you're going to pick in the draft. Now I get to hear it from other people. But let's do this real quick, because we're out of time. We're not going to be able to get to our mock draft tonight, but let's talk about some of the. We don't have to go into a lot of detail, but some of the busts that you had already talked about. You brought in. We talked about Dobbins already.
Yeah, I have Mixon as a potential bust. I know that's I don't want him to be. I want him to do well. His just yards per carry is so far down. It was awful last year. Burrow's coming back from the injury. I know that
Gio Bernard is not there. They've already made it clear that they want this to be Mixon's backfield. The opportunities are there, but I understand the concern, right? So yeah, I get that. It's funny that we talked about James Robinson, who went from a potential bust to now possibly being
Superstar,
a great sleeper. And, and it's funny, you kind of laughed when you said it, but yeah, I'm putting Robinson above J.K. Dobbins. I mean, we have already seen what Robinson can do. And yes, that line was putrid last night. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think that, DeAndre Swift, who I've been up and down on, I think he's also somebody that has the potential of being a bust. And mainly because of the Jamal Williams factor. We don't know to what extent it's going to be a running back by committee. We already talked about Mike Evans earlier when we were talking about stacks. I think he's got a potential of being a bust too, if he continues, because right now he's got a pretty high ADP.
Right.
So, I think you can pass on somebody like Evans, grab a DJ Moore or Brandon Ayuk later. Or even Chris Godwin, who's being drafted after him.
Yeah, I remember last year those two were being drafted, back to back.
Right.
They were, but yeah, I think both of those guys should have equal seasons. But what is that season going to be? It could be,
Yeah.
1,200 yards each, or is it going to be 800 yards each? They who knows?
I think some of the other people that are being drafted a little too high, just to name them off real quick. I think Kyle Pitts right now is being drafted a little high without knowing what he can do. I think Jalen Hurts is being drafted a little high. I think if there's a quarterback that has the potential of a big bust, it could be Jalen Hurts. And obviously Jamar Chase, we've seen the fact that he dropped. You're a big Chase fan. I mean, how do you
I
feel
have
about
been. I haven't really talked about him over the past few weeks. It does not look like he's having a very good camp. They're not down on him. I've been kind of keeping an eye on it. I still think he's going to get a lot of opportunity. I mean, I would certainly take Higgins or Boyd before I took Chase at this point. But the preseason doesn't always equate to what's going to happen during the season. And he was out of football for a year, right? So how does that equating to catching up, to getting his legs under him, all those things? And we'll see. But I've definitely quieted on Chase quite a bit. Yeah,
and he's being drafted pretty high. And I think I don't know if it's tasteless, but it's one of the funniest tweets I've seen in a long time. And
wow.
And I think it's just to show, look, I mean, he's just not doing well in camp. He's not doing well in preseason. So let me take this down here.
Wow, because please take that down. That's awful.
I didn't write it. I just saw it. I didn't even retweet it. I just screenshot it and sent it to everybody who's watching. All right. So next week we'll go ahead. We'll continue talking about busts, and then we're going to talk about our sleepers too. Who are the guys that we're thinking about grabbing that other people don't know about? And whether it's somebody like Chase Claypool, people that aren't necessarily at the top of everyone's list that might end up being a sleeper. We're going to talk about that, and hopefully we'll have time to get through our mock draft. Although next week, it may not be on a Tuesday night, but we will let everybody know because there's going to be a dynasty draft next Tuesday night. So we'll figure that out, and we'll let everybody know.
Yep.
I want to thank Kenneth for his question. I want to thank all of the Facebook users for asking us questions during the show. Chris from Yards After the Catch, we appreciate you as well. Brad, anything to say?
Nope. Looking forward to starting on my draft starting next Tuesday. And I have a bunch of them in about a week and a half. So looking forward to that. And can't wait till next week.
All right, guys, stay safe out there.